Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of What the Dementia by Bambu Care. I'm your host, Brianna Wilson. I am a certified dementia practitioner and the founder of Bambu Care. So today's episode is actually an inspired podcast episode. So I was perusing the interwebs like I often do, and I came across a post that said, "The person who has Alzheimer's knows that pieces of the puzzle are missing and they are terrified." And then underneath the post, there was a comment that basically said, "We don't need to know that they are terrified," which is an understandable response, but I want to talk about it and have a real discussion. Now, I will just forewarn you, this may be a controversial topic for some people, but as I always say, I never intend to offend anyone. It's just food for thought, having a conversation, okay? But before we get into today's topic, quick housekeeping. So the biggest thing is that our new Dementia Care book, With Intent, a practical guide to navigating behaviors along the dementia care journey, will be available for pre-order next week, Wednesday, April 27th, 2022. Guys, I am super excited about this. It will only be available for those in the US initially, but I'll be working on making it available to other places as well after the pre-order launch, okay? Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, With Intent is basically an easy-to-read guide/book that provides dementia care partners with useful tips and techniques to adapt to, modify, or eliminate challenging behaviors in persons living with dementia, okay? Now, fair enough, I can admit there are many great books out there that are related to the topic of dementia care. But I will say that it really does no good if a person can't get through them, right? Sometimes the resources and books that are available are really good, but they're just so big and jam-packed full of information that it's so hard to really take what you need to take away from it, okay? So that's where With Intent comes in. And if you want to learn more about our book, I would definitely recommend that you check out the podcast notes. There you will find a quick video about it. And also be sure to sign up for our newsletter at letsbamboo.com/newsletter to stay up to date and get notified when pre-orders open. I also wanted to let you know that if you haven't checked out our resources already, our April freebies are available as well as our previous freebies, and one of our most recent freebies is our Dementia Friendly Spaces Quick Tips freebie, which outlines 10 quick tips to make your home more dementia friendly. So if you're interested, you can download any of our resources at letsbamboo.com and you'll just click on the resources tab, okay? So now that that's all out of the way, let's get into the topic. Do we really need to know that people living with dementia are terrified? And well, are they really terrified? So let's define the word terrified, just so that we can make sure that we are all on the same page, right? So to be terrified is to be filled with extreme fear. So would a person diagnosed with dementia have a reason to be filled with extreme fear? Well, it's fair to say that stigma around dementia is still very strong, okay? And if you haven't listened to our podcast, Stigma Behind Dementia, I'd highly recommend it, okay? And so I'll link that in the podcast notes. But in general, dementia is a very feared condition, and many people, especially older adults, are often more concerned about developing dementia than they are about cancer or heart disease or having a stroke, okay? So the thing is, most people have heard about dementia, but many people don't fully understand it. So when you think about dementia, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Like really, I want you to take a moment and think about it. And I'll give you a few seconds, but of course you can also pause it. I really want you to think about what comes to mind when you think about dementia. First thing. For many of you, you won't have the most positive first thoughts or representation of dementia in your mind. And that's okay. Dementia is a very challenging diagnosis for everyone involved, and there's a lot that comes with it. There's no denying that, okay? Now, in Q&A number 7, I addressed the question, what stage do you think is harder for the loved one and for the caregiver? And for the person with dementia, I stated that I believe that stage 4 is the hardest, which I still stand by. Now, what is stage 4 and what is happening? Okay, so stage 4 is considered mild dementia, but it's moderate cognitive decline. And I think that's something important to keep in mind that sometimes we forget, because in those early stages, it is called mild dementia or early dementia. But it's important to understand that at this stage, it's moderate cognitive decline. And in this stage, there is clear, visible, and measurable signs of cognitive impairment. But we have to remember that dementia is progressive, right? So someone just doesn't jump to stage 4 mild dementia, right? If you recall from the podcast episode on the stages of dementia that I did, I think it was like a 3-part type of thing, I mentioned that stage 2 is when impairments in cognition become evident to the person who has them. But if you were to ask friends or family or coworkers, they wouldn't notice anything unusual. So by the time a person reaches stage 4, they are typically very aware of the challenges and increasing difficulties that they are having when it comes not only to their memory, but their overall ability to manage things outside of themselves. So work, finances, taking care of their family and pets, driving, interacting in social situations. Okay, so a lot is happening. And during stage 4, there's a lot of emotions that come up because of this feeling of loss of independence, this feeling of people starting to take over. Because for a lot of people, once they get that diagnosis, families start intervening, and I always nickname it that stage of take and tell, because that's what happens. Family members will come in and they start taking things over and telling the person what to do. So to take a step back, what happens when you can already tell that things aren't quite right, and then you get a diagnosis of dementia? For some people, they'll feel relieved, like, okay, so I'm not crazy. There's actually something going on here. But for most people, it's scary, especially if you've been noticing things here and there over the years, but you contribute it to other things like, oh, I'm just stressed, I'm tired, I'm probably not getting enough sleep, I'm probably not drinking enough water, I haven't been eating right, I probably just need to exercise my brain more, I just kind of watch TV and don't do much else after work, maybe I'm just a little depressed, life hasn't been going the greatest for me, and yeah, sometimes I'm down, so maybe that's what it is, right? These are things that we can be comfortable contributing our difficulties to in most cases, right? But dementia? True dementia? Not pseudo-dementia, which resembles dementia but is often reversible, especially if it's caught early enough, but true dementia. Well, some may say, well, what's the difference? So, in short, true dementia is neurodegenerative, but pseudo-dementia is not. And I'll have to do a podcast episode on pseudo-dementia because we really haven't got into it. Now, with true dementia, what's happening? The brain is dying, okay? It's progressive, and there's no cure. And even when you're first diagnosed, if you don't understand this and you simply know it as memory loss, which of course it's much more than that, but I'm just saying, if you just know it as memory loss, that in itself, stigma or no stigma, I think we can all admit that that's pretty scary to think about. So what happens? Withdrawal maybe? Mourning sense of self, right? Denial? Like, yeah, I have some issues, but no way, I don't have dementia. Of course, there does come a point as dementia progresses where it may no longer be denial, but instead anosognosia, which is essentially a lack of awareness of their deficits. Okay? So it's more of a there's nothing wrong with me, and the doctor doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Regardless, there are very few people who could comfortably say and admit, my brain is dying and that's okay. Or I will be suffering from severe memory loss and that's okay. Whatever that understanding is at the time. So, yes, especially in the early stages, many people living with dementia are terrified. Even more so if maybe they've witnessed other family members go through it, or if they've heard stories from friends who maybe had to take care of a loved one. There's a lot of feelings that can come up when someone receives the diagnosis of dementia. Now, what about the later stages? So I could go on and on about this for a while, but as I always say, I don't want the podcast episode to get too long. But as dementia progresses, there may come a time where they don't really know what they don't know. And as their short-term memory fades, long-term memories intermix with current reality, or dreams get confused with current reality, and a lot of confusion happens. A lot of things just no longer make sense. Now, I will say that there are some blissfully confused people with dementia. They're in their own world and they're happy about it. But for others, they have a really hard time. Nothing seems right, okay? And if the person has auditory or visual hallucinations, which is more common with Lewy body dementia, but other people have them as well, you can imagine how this could really mess with a person too, right? So, in short, not everyone who has dementia is terrified, but many are. And even if we don't go as far as to say that they're terrified, we must admit that depression and anxiety in those living with dementia are real issues. Again, some of you know how I feel about statistics because they do vary by study and source but let's just say that about up to 40% of people living with dementia have depression and or anxiety. I think that percentage is high enough to realize that this is an issue, okay? Now, the next big question is, do we really need to know this? Why tell me this? I don't want to know my partner may be terrified or depressed or anxious. Now, if this is you, my question to you would be, why? Why don't you want to know this? Is it because it makes accepting your partner's diagnosis just that much harder? Is it because it makes you sad to think about? Is it because hearing that they're terrified, depressed, or anxious makes you feel similar feelings? What's your reason? There's no right or wrong answer or reason. I don't want you to think that. But I think that it's important to acknowledge the resistance or hesitance to want to know this, okay? So with Bambu, we are all about acknowledging what is the reality of our partners living with dementia. If you didn't know, which many people don't, Bambu stands for Believing Affection Means Better Understanding. And so how can we possibly give our partners the affection that they need and deserve if we don't acknowledge and understand what they may be going through? The short answer is we can't. How can we validate how they may be feeling if we don't know or recognize how they may really be feeling? Again, we can't. And unfortunately, sometimes they can't always communicate this to us. And so we have to pick up on the nonverbals. We have to pick up on their cues. We have to kind of make inferred judgments, okay? A large percentage of dementia care is relationship building, which is why I love the term dementia care partner. In my opinion, it really benefits you to look at the dynamic between you and the person you are caring for as a partnership. And for you to be a good partner or a teammate, you have to be able to understand the person that you are in a partnership with. And honestly, it will make your care journey much easier. Things will start clicking for you in ways that you never thought was possible. Like, oh, that's why mom does that. Well, no wonder dad won't stop following me around. No wonder my sister keeps asking me to go home. Well, shoot, if I was experiencing that, I'd probably cry and scream too. Do you get what I'm saying? So, in short, no, not all people with dementia are terrified, but many people are. And it's important to know that your partner living with dementia may be too. And honestly, it's okay if you are as well. Again, dementia is not a walk through a bluebonnet field, okay? It's just not. It's more of a hike, okay? Now, I personally don't love hiking, but what I do love is to equip others for theirs. And I just came up with that, and I kind of like it, so I might run with that, but we'll see. So hopefully you gained something from this inspired podcast episode. My desire is that you can always take a little something away from every podcast episode. So I hope I gave you at least a little bit of food for thought. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter, especially if you are interested in our new Dementia Care book with intent that will be available for pre-order next week, April 27th, 2022. If anyone has any questions, comments, or future podcast requests, you can always send us an email at podcast@whatthedementia.com. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of What the Dementia by Bambu Care. We look forward to catching you on the next episode. Take care, and until next time, stay strong, care on, and remember, you are not alone. Bambu Care is always here.